Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. And by George, we've got many issues that are talking about here in the state of Oregon. Okay, got me? Naturally, I've been covering national and even from a local standpoint, and then naturally the swamp, which is Portland. And as you know, this is where everything generates. All the issues, the major issues are generated. And then the three major top issues that they tend to cite is the homeless situation, mental health, and public safety. But they left out one, education for our youth. They left out one. And so consequently, I've gone to someone that's been here on the Voters Digest, very familiar with that issue as far as education is concerned, been there, walked the lines. He knows it in and out and this, that, and the other. And he's very, very familiar with what's happening as of today. And as you've been hearing things like budget issues, them cutting this and cutting classroom time. In fact, just of late, they said they weren't going to be basically, I guess the governor basically said, in no way are you going to be cutting the classroom time. Now all of a sudden they're talking about, as far as the school board is concerned, now we're going to have to go back to the teachers. I don't know what the salary, they don't know which way to go, aspect of it. But the key is that they're not dealing with the importance of the young people, the kids that are going to school. No one talks about that. They've got issues that they still haven't resolved. We've got a school board that's sitting there and whatever. So the bottom line, we need to bring people up to date. Excuse about that. This is another phone situation, but we'll get it going. Okay, good. All right. Come on in, Rochelle. I'll see you a little later in a minute. Okay? Take care, bye. I'll see you in a minute. Come on down.
Yeah, okay, bye.
Okay, sorry about that. This is community television, folks, but the bottom line is I got another guest coming in on another area. But anyway, we're going to be talking about schools. And so I've got with me today, you've seen him before, Steve Buell. Not only has he been a teacher, he's been on the school board, he's been all over the place. And when you start thinking about Vanport, he's been even in the Washington area, he's taught there, aspect of it. He's been all over the place. And if anybody knows what's going on, and you really can't talk about this issue if you can't talk about the history and the background, what brought us to this particular point, and the changes and this, that, and the other. So we've got him here today, and we're going to let him talk, because we're going to let him talk to the topic areas that's going to educate you, the public, you, the employers. Remember, we're not talking about politicians. This show represents the people. The people. We, the people, are, if you will, the employers. The elected officials are the employees. And unfortunately, we've got to educate you about that piece, because as an employer, you've hired supposedly the experts, which are the elected officials. And unfortunately, they don't have the background. They don't have the background. That's why we are here where we are today. And that's what Steve is going to do. He's going to bring you up to date. He's going to talk about his experience and exposure, etc., and bring you up to date and educate you about what the education system is all about and how is it so important to make sure we bring the kids up, because that's our backbone. They're the futures, and no one's talking about that. Okay? With that, Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
sorry
Getting along. It's good. The one thing I'd add is I still try and pay careful attention to what's going on a national and a state level. I'm not in the classroom anymore. Mm-hmm. The kids are slightly different, mm-hmm. I think, now because of the internet and all of mm-hmm. That. But they're still. I went yesterday to a track meet,
okay,
and I looked around that track meet, and the kids were the same as they used to be at any track meet.
Right.
I mean, you can still educate them. You can still run schools. You can still do all those things. So some of the questions about what's actually going on mm-hmm. and how they're attempting to educate children, I think they're making some mistakes, mm-hmm. and they're making them all over in Oregon and the national stuff. I mean, and in Portland. I mean, if you just go back to the reading, They're finally coming back around on the reading to say we have to now teach phonics still. So they kind of moved away from it at a national level. Oregon was 49th, I think, in the entire country on reading, but they've kind of moved back to we need to teach phonics. Now they're a little slow about it. What they didn't understand on this shifting back and doing a better job of reading is that their teachers aren't trained in it. They don't know what to teach necessarily, a lot of them, because when they went to school, they went to college, they didn't get trained in teaching phonics and in teaching reading. Teaching reading is a complete system, and phonics is a major part of it. And that's it. And they didn't get really trained like that. They were trained on what they call Lucy Calkins and cueing and so forth. And they just, in 2017, when I was on the school board, they put together a program. We had a pretty good guy in charge of it, and he put together the reading program. And phonics, I made sure phonics in 2017 was a major part of it. Well, when Guerrero came in, things disappeared.
Wow. And what position was he?
He was the superintendent.
He was superintendent now.
And I didn't think he did a very good job, particularly. That's just my opinion. But the reading program with the phonics and stuff kind of got pushed to the side in Portland. And then they didn't have, their teachers weren't getting trained in it. Even the best colleges in Oregon were not training their teachers well. And they haven't for years. But I mean, teachers would then they would begin to understand how to teach reading, and a lot of times they get it from older teachers who were doing it. My first wife was a school teacher, wonderful reading teacher. Every kid, she was in a North Portland school, every kid in her first grade classrooms for the 4 years she taught there could read grade level. Every kid, period. And I know other people like that because they knew how to do it. But it's funny, in education they kind of move into these systems. And I think part of it is because if you're a educational administrator, it used to be that you became a principal, say, because you wanted to have a bigger impact on education. You could have a larger impact. That was a good thing. I have a tough time sometimes with administrators because there's two things you get that are maybe positive, if you want to say they are. One, you get a lot more money. So maybe your wife or husband says, oh, we can make more money, you become a principal, and there you go. And the second is you get away from the kids. Teaching school can be hard.
Yes, very much so.
You got 25, 30 kids in your classroom every day, and and so kind of moving away from that, for some people that's good. Well, that creates some problems because now I got to worry about my job if I'm the principal, say, or if I'm a school administrator. And so what happens often is you can sit down and talk to a school administrator, and the first thing that happens is they got their hands up, being defensive, and the reason they want to make sure, and so they bring in a reading program that maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but they're now covered. See, if I bring in the reading program, there was a reading committee, it was the school board, and then and I brought in the program that other people, you can't really criticize me for bringing it in, and I'm covered. So instead of doing things like, okay, we need to teach phonics in every one of our classrooms, and we need to, no, because you're not covered when you do that. You got to bring in the program you buy, and that covers you. And then the new programs are, the new one that everybody's moving on, which is called the Science of Reading. It's, at least they're dealing with the phonics and the other types of things that they need to do. But what I'm saying is, for years they didn't do that.
Okay. When you talk about for years, I'm thinking about that one of the little historic. I came in during the Blanchard era. so to speak.
But yeah, that was back in 1970.
Right, same, so to speak.
And so then, did I, 74. Right. I went
then it transitioned, and then we had all these other superintendents that were there, and one that was pretty well excited was Matt Proffitt.
He was the best.
So
we ever had that. He's the best superintendent I've ever seen.
Okay. Why would you think he was the best?
Well, he was best for two main reasons. The one reason, he's a very smart man.
Okay.
And he cared about people. I mean, he really did. And the second, though, was that he cared about what was going on in those classrooms.
Superintendent.
He cared about the classroom. That's what that's where education takes place. It doesn't take place down at the administration offices or in the school board meetings. It takes place in that classroom. And he understood that, and he wanted to make sure every classroom was working and the follow-through was there. Also, he understood they'd had a lot of problems in Portland in those years.
Yes.
Which is, that was back to the stuff that you and I worked on with Herb Cawthorn, Ronnie Herndon, and stuff. We did that stuff where they had 10 predominantly black schools that were all having to send their kids to another school to get a decent one. Should be able to get a decent school in your neighborhood. And really they couldn't. And then and Proffitt was the follow-through guy that made sure it happened, and they got decent schools. In fact, Portland at that time with Proffitt was considered by many people the #1 big city school district in America.
Wow.
And I mean, that was really...
And was it inclusive of all the kids?
Yes.
That's the key, yes.
But what happened it got rid of that, and people think, this is ages ago and it doesn't have anything. Well, no, I've sat at those school board meetings since 1974. So have you. You and I used to sit in them together.
Exactly.
And we can see the changes, what happened. We can see the history and how it became. It's like saying, you can't tell the history of the president now. Well, yes, you can. You can go back in 250 years.
Sure can. Yes, exactly.
You can figure out stuff. And so when Proffitt left, which is about 1990 or 91, they hired another superintendent, and that superintendent wasn't oriented to all the kids, in my opinion. And they never really had one that was willing to stand up and really be oriented to the kids. Now, one of the things that happened on the I'll go into some stuff because I want to talk about some other things first. I want to talk about the math.
Yes,
all across the country now, and I read every day probably educational things from all across the country. That's why I've been able to stay somewhat in touch. Plus, my younger brother has 27 grandchildren, and so I see those kids and talk to and see what's happening at their school and stuff. But the math, they're doing the same mistake they made in the reading. They didn't do the phonics in the reading, which is the basics. Well, in math, what they've moved to in many cases, they've shifted away from actually doing the problems. This sounds weird to people your age and my age.
Right.
And they're doing concepts. Well, you need to do the concepts. If I'm going to study fractions, I need to understand what a fraction is, how it works, how you can build them, You have to do that. But you also got to know how to do the problems. If the problem's 1 2/3 times 4 1/5, you need to know how to do that. And in order to learn how to do that, you have to actually do it and work at it and come back and do it and then review it. They're not doing that across the whole country now. And if you look at the math scores are all down. Well, yeah, because they're not doing the problems. And part of it is the whole idea of you don't have to really know the math yourself. You can always do it on your phone or on your computer. And I draw an analogy like this. You don't need to know history because you can look anything up.
Right.
Well, the problem with that is, let's say we take 1871, and in 1871, if you know the context of history, you can understand what was happening in the South, what was happening in the North. North was moving away, not worrying about it anymore in terms of the race stuff, and the South was just pummeling the race, just pummeling black people, and just, and you know that. So if I'm reading a book, or if I'm looking something, I'm reading something or looking at an article, and they talk about 1871, I have a sense of what that was. But how many people, let alone kids, are going to now, 1871. Well, I better go look that up, 1871, and then I better look and see what was going on. What are you going to do, look up the whole Civil War and the previous 50 years, and then figure it all out by the time you get to when it happened in 1871? It doesn't work that way. You need a context.
Comprehension.
I know when the Civil War ended. I know how many years that was. And it's the same with things like with really what used to call 3 R's, the basics. It's the same with reading. Can you do the blends? Do you know what END sounds like? Math, can you do the fractions? Education is about teaching young children things that are worthwhile for them to know. It's not about being able to look anything up. It's about, and they're finding, and I want to talk a little bit about that when we get to technology here. They're finding that there's some negative stuff about giving every kid a Chromebook. There's some negative things. When you just read something and work on something on your computer or your Chromebook or your phone even, you don't learn it the same as if you're writing it, say. It's not, there's a difference. And they need to begin to take that into account, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyhow, the math is a problem across the country, and I think that's the main reason. And the other thing that's a problem is a huge problem is the writing. So you got the 3 R's. You got the reading, math, and now you got writing.
Yes.
Well, writing's a huge problem because it's kind of the same thing. Can you now put it on AI and it'll write it for you? Well, the first time I used the Chat GPT, the first time I put in, I thought, I'm going to see how this works. And I said...
On this?
No, well, it was on my computer.
On the computer?
Yeah, I'm on my computer way more than my phone.
Yes,
But the first time I put in, I said, write a poem about Babe Ruth.
Yes. Interesting.
And it came back with a poem about Babe Ruth.
Did it?
And it was darn good.
Oh, really?
It was a really good poem. I thought, this is a really good poem. And I realized I used to teach poetry in my 6th grade classroom.
Right.
And kids wrote poetry. Right. But now, see, it gets you where you're going. Do I really need to learn how to write? I can put it in here. Do I need to be able to think really? I can put it in here. And so the whole idea of, in a way, of actually educating children to know things in their brain.
Right.
Or to be able to do things without help themselves.
Right.
Is getting compromised to some degree. Now, I'm not saying you don't want to do it, because I think there's things you really want to do with technology. I think it's become the 4th basic skill, technology, which I'll talk about in just a second. But I want to finish one more thing about writing. You need to write in order to learn to write. Well, the problem with writing things is that if you're the teacher, kids are writing along, writing a page. Write me a composition on somebody who you admire, okay? Write a composition. And it's going to take you a while to do that. Maybe a week, let's say. Take you a week. Well, the problem is that now I, the teacher, got to correct it. I should correct it. Now, there are people who have kind of ideas of how you can kind of get around that a little bit, but basically, no, I'm stuck. I gotta correct this paper. So if let's say I have them start writing on Monday, maybe on Friday you say, here's our next week's subject we're gonna write on. Write a composition on this. And they would work on it all week, and on Friday they hand it in, and now I'm looking at 25 papers that I have to correct. So what's happened, since nobody's testing the writing, they did it in Oregon for a while, they tested the writing, but they're not doing it anymore. Not really. They maintain it. They're doing it in the reading test, but
they don't.
It's got to be malarkey. When you composition writing is you start with a topic and you write something on it,
right?
And then you end up with. It's like in a newspaper. People think of the books they read, which are quite creative often, but really the writing you're teaching is basically like newspaper writing. Yes. Here you're writing on this topic, and you can do different topics.
Right.
I mean, you can make them up. I used to do what would be a good television show? Write about what would who some of the characters and like that.
Right.
I mean, just anything that my interest somebody. Who was a person you admire? I said that earlier, but who write about, do you have a cousin or a brother or something, and write and tell about what he's like, or sister, what she's like. I mean, there are compositions, but the deal is you just don't learn to write by writing. You really learn to write by, now I mean to write like a newspaper, not creatively. Creative writing is similar to art. There's not really one way to do it, but composition type writing, like I'm talking about, or what you do for a job, that's like a newspaper. And so you want to teach kids to write like that, to paragraph. For instance, you should be doing paragraphs at least in the third grade, say. And, well, it's like in the third grade, every kid should know their times tables for math at the end of the third grade. If they don't, they should almost fire you as a school teacher but they're not doing it to the same degree. But so on the writing, the other thing is you have to understand grammar. If you don't understand grammar, and they think, well, you can do Grammarly. Well, I can do Grammarly. It'll bring up Grammarly on something I write. And my older brother started a Willamette Week newspaper. I wrote for it. I have a pretty good idea of how to write. And Grammarly will come up and go, is that what? Does that make sense? I mean, it can write it for you, but that doesn't mean you get to where you want, or you're able to do it yourself, or you can write a love letter to your girlfriend. I guess maybe it might be better on the AI than what you might write, but you should be able to do it, because then you can look and see and do what you really want to do. Anyhow, so the writing.
Can I comprehend?
They don't teach grammar as a system. Grammar is a system. They teach it often as, we'll put up a few sentences and we'll see what's wrong with these sentences. Well, no, you want to know what's wrong with it. And they need to teach grammar as a system, and then you do writing almost every day, all year. So it sounds like I'm really anti-technology. Well, no, I'm anti-negative results of technology. But technology should be the fourth basic skill, I believe.
Interesting.
And so what you should be doing is not letting the technology come in and mess around with the other basics. Now we're talking. I'm talking elementary school here. All this stuff today is elementary school.
Elementary, yes.
Not high school, not high school.
Yes.
And but what you need to do with the technology, which they haven't done well, they kind of have, but not really. You need to, what am I teaching about technology in the third grade? Now, we talked about math. They know, even though they don't do a good job of it, of saying that that's what, but you should know your times tables in the third grade. And very few teachers, I would guess, actually are positive that that's the case. They have, the ODE has standards they write, and the standard for the times tables in the third grade is the last sentence of the whole thing for the third grade says, it's good to know something like times tables for, one little sentence, instead of like it's huge. It's like it's huge, but mathematically it's huge, but it's not put that way. Well, they need to take technology and sit down. What do you learn in the first grade about technology? What is second grade? What's the third grade? What's the fourth, the fifth, the sixth? And so children, for instance, I was talking to a educator, and they don't do what we used to call typing, which is now called keyboarding. Everybody uses a keyboard.
Yeah,
They probably ought to teach you how to do. I see people and go like this on their phone, you know.
Exactly.
I'm like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. Yeah.
So maybe they should be teaching you. They certainly should be teaching you keyboarding.
Yeah, yes.
And they weren't. I have no idea why not. I mean, actually, it was the most valuable thing I learned in school, probably, other than reading. I can type pretty good, and I can rattle off something to you here. I type this up, no problem.
Yes.
And so, each grade should have what it is, and somebody should figure that out. Now, the problem is, here's the problem with this kind of stuff. They bring in a tech guy to do it. Well, when they bring in the math guy, he doesn't, or she doesn't really lay out. Okay, in the third grade, we want to know. They're beyond all that. So you really kind of want to bring in people and look and say, you know, fourth grade, what you want to bring in teachers. You want to bring in more than just the people from the ODE to do it. I talked to the head math guy at ODE. He does things, I don't know.
ODE, what do you?
The Oregon Department of Education.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's the same guy or not, but I tried to explain about this doing problems. No, they didn't. Because he was a math guy.
Yes.
And so you want to make sure you got the concepts, see? And so in the technology, boom, 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 boom. Now, in Oregon, that was all national stuff, but in Oregon, Oregon was like at one point 49th in the country in reading. So what,
49 out of who?
Math is down.
49 out of what?
They're not doing the stuff that I just talked about, that scores and that would help. But the other problem now they're having in Oregon, of course, the budget.
Yes, that's huge.
And they didn't kind of cover it in the legislature enough. You got Portland's $50 million short. Well, I don't know where the $50 million went, but I know that if
$50 million short.
This next year, they're going to find $50 million.
Yes,
that's hard to do. There's an old one of your shows that had Matt Prophet on it.
Yes.
You had done the only lengthy interview ever done by Matt Prophet was on your show, and Prophet, he talks about that he had saved $40 million. Out of he'd moved it. He hadn't saved it. He'd moved it from administration to classrooms.
Wow,
$40 million. He talks about that in that thing, and so if you got when we had a guy by the name of Yusef Awad, and he was just a fabulous money guy in Portland. He was, he was good. We actually made him superintendent twice for 3 months. In fact, the biggest mistake I made on the school board probably was not keeping Yusef Awad as a superintendent. And when Guerrero came in, he got rid of him because he was competitive.
Yes.
And he's a brilliant guy. And when he came, Portland was $17.5 million in debt. When he left, they were, 1 year when I was there, they had $17 million to spend extra. The ex-Kim school board said, we got $17 million, where should we spend it?
Wow. And
they didn't spend it well. They didn't spend it where I thought they had to spend it, but they spent it. But the point was, boy, now I'm working with in Canby. Canby has a wonderful, smart, wonderful woman superintendent, as good as almost I've ever seen, and she's really good. But the people ahead of her may likely spent where they shouldn't, and so Canby's short about $6 to $7 million.
Jeez.
And I hope the people will vote for it, because $6-7 million out of Canby only has like 6-7 schools. You're going to take out, if you take out $1 million a school, that's a lot.
God.
It's going to be rough. And who wants to vote for more money for their taxes now? Who wants to do that? I mean, I have real good friends or family who, I don't know, you know. I'm saying, no, you need to, you want to make sure your education works. And They got yanked around by the feds now, recently, ended up losing a bunch of stuff. But anyhow, so that budget is a problem. I hope people will realize it wasn't just the educators mucking it up. It was stuff that was in a way beyond their deal. But Yousef Awad, he wouldn't be 50 million is my guess. But I don't know about that. I don't know that for sure. But I doubt it. Now they do. There's one thing that I kind of know though. You saw, speaking of Portland, you saw where they're spending $61 million of the bond to a company which is going to oversee the bond. Okay, 61 million of the bond money to a company that's going to oversee the bond. When I was on the school board, Yousef Awad hired a guy by the name of Jerry Vincent. And Jerry Vincent had overseen 17 bonds, which I presume all came in fine.
Yes.
Jerry Vincent, I doubt if they paid him $200,000, they might have paid him $160,000. And he probably had a couple of assistants that they added, maybe. Mm-hmm. But they were under $1 million. And now they're $61 million for the same thing that Jerry Vincent did, who had a track record of doing it. Now you tell me.
Wow.
I actually talked to Yousef Awad about that whole thing, and he kind of led me through what you needed to make sure took place in your bonds. Jerry Vincent was able to do it. Now, he disappeared under Guerrero too. They had him left over, and the Lincoln bond had all sorts of problems. Jerry Vincent left. So that's a lot of money. Now that money's already spent. You can't get it back. It's in the bond money, 61.
Right.
The only way you get it back would be to move, but they're not going to do that. They've got this company, and they're going to do the company, and it's been in all over the newspapers. But Jerry Vincent, Yousef Awad, a lot less than 61 million.
Oh wow!
So that's one of the things in Portland that worries me. But nothing you can do about that one. But the other thing is they're looking at school closures. Mm-hmm. They're thinking about closing 10 schools. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a couple of people that I know who really are very, very good at this type of finance stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not a finance guy, mm-hmm. but I have a pretty good idea what happens in a neighborhood if they take your little K-5 school out of there. Mm-hmm. The one where, are you going to close 10 schools in Portland? So you're going to have a big negative effect on 10 neighborhoods? Mm-hmm. Is that what Portland needs right now? No, I don't think so. No. Portland's struggling.
Big time.
And so you're now going to close down 10 neighborhood schools? Little schools where my kid who's in the second grade, I can walk him down 2 blocks down here to the school, and the one that I know all the teachers basically because he's been there a year or two already, I'm going to send him down the street. Now I'm going to put him on a bus, or I'm going to send him across town in order to, well, if we're 50 million in short, then you need to close a bunch of schools and save millions of dollars. Wow. That's what they say. Here's the problem. The people, I have a really good friend who really knows school economic stuff. He's really good in finance, really good. He says you don't save any money when you close a school. You don't save money. They're going to close 10 neighborhood schools, maybe, and you're not going to save any money. Now, I think you got to save some money someplace.
Right.
But he says, no, basically you don't, because what happens is, you got to educate the same kids.
Wow.
And you still have to maintain the building, because you can't let it rot into nothing, And that you can sell it, but do you want to sell these little schools in case Portland builds again? Then you got to find where to put them, carry all that. You really, I've always been opposed. I've never seen a deal where it really worked to sell off school property. Yeah. Hang on to it, but if you don't maintain the building, it's going to rot and be worthless. you take extra money to put it back, the roof's going to leak or whatever. So you have that. You also are educating the same number of children. So now maybe you get rid of the vice principal, which there probably isn't a vice. You get rid of the principal at these small schools. Let's say you have 250 kids in your school, which is around what a lot of the ones are looking at, evidently. Well, the kids all go over to new school, a bunch of them. You may need a vice principal there because you got a way bigger school now. So you got to put in money there. And what about your library? Do you have enough room in the school, or are you going to have to now redo some things? What does it cost? It all costs to move them too. There's huge costs. And so just saying it closes schools is, are you kidding? Not according to my friend who really knows. He said, no, just maybe don't save any. So you're going to come into Portland, ram down 10 neighborhood schools in your little neighborhood, which you live in. Portland, you live in a neighborhood, you don't live in the whole city.
Right, exactly.
And you're not, right. So you're going to be destructive, really destructive. Not only are you going to be destructive of the neighborhood itself, because you're taking the school out of there, which the little kids could walk down to, or which somebody will move into because you have a decent little school down there. You want children to move, families to move into Portland. So if you don't have decent school, you're not moving into Portland there. But then the other thing is, your house value goes down.
That's right.
Sure. So maybe the school even makes a few million, but your house value goes down. So when your kid gets out of that school, you want to move or something, and down. And so what you want to do is figure out some things that I haven't seen them do yet. One, you want to figure out if you're going to make any money. Are you going to make money? Two, what's the impact on the neighborhood? But there's a third thing, and this is something that you and I have talked about for 50 years, and that's that Portland doesn't really know if their schools all have equal educational opportunity.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't know if this school over here has the same educational stuff as this school. They've never figured it out, and they've never since. And it's a big deal because when you had Prophet as a superintendent 35 years ago, he cared about every school. You knew, but when he left, they kind of maybe moved back to where if you're in a more well-to-do neighborhood, you got a better deal going. Well, when the last year I was on school board, 2016, 2017, where we got the school board changed over and we could actually kind of maybe get something through. They wouldn't let me talk the first 2 years, as I know you probably remember that.
Yep,
wouldn't even let me talk.
I remember that.
Couldn't bring up anything.
I remember
they wouldn't, but the last 2 years we could do some things, and one of the things that Paul Anthony, who was a very smart man,
on the school board.
Was on the school board, and we set up a committee with Yusef Awad, which was going to look and compare and figure out how all of the schools, their programs and their opportunities, were they the same? Were they equal? In other words, if I say to somebody, okay, tell me what they teach in the 5th grade in Portland. Well, in some school districts, they say we teach this and this, 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 and this at every school. And every school has this and has this and has this. Portland's never had that. And they can't tell you. They can tell you, but you can't go from the outside and look and see how it actually works. Because if this material that's on the outside says you got a PE teacher, well, I got a PE teacher here and a PE teacher here, but what portion of that PE teacher actually, if it's got more kids here and less here and more, they've never sat down and figured out how the system, is it equal? And I'm not talking high schools. They did high schools years ago. You probably remember that. And they did a pretty good job. You can get a good education in any high school in Portland. The reason is you get to choose your classes. I can send a kid into a high school in Portland, and he or she can choose. They got Spanish here, and they all have, other than Jefferson, they all have good setups for what they have. In terms of you can send your kid to any high school, and there's a lot of good electives and things they can take, and decent teachers, but it's not that way necessarily, because you don't know. You don't know in the fifth grade or the fourth grade what they're doing. So what we tried to do, we started a committee that was going to look at that problem and make sure that if you're in the well-to-do neighborhood and you're in the poor neighborhood, is one of them, it's a well-to-do neighborhood getting more than the poor neighborhood, or vice versa? Was the poor getting more? No, everybody pays taxes,
right? Exactly.
And that should have equal opportunity.
Exactly.
Now, they did that a few years ago, and Beaverton kind of tried to do that. Here's what you get in every one of our schools. And they didn't sneak in. I don't know Beaverton well enough to know, but you could sneak in things, but no, not under a system where you really laid it out. The other thing, once you do that, then they should have that, and making that equal. That should be equal.
Right, exactly.
But the special programs like special reading and ESL should be equitable. If you've got more ESL kids, then you should have more stuff. If you've got more kids who need reading help, then you should have more reading help. I mean, those special programs. Now, I'm not talking special ed. That's a whole other ball game. But so those special programs, they should be equitable. Are they? Nobody knows. You can't check. They'd have to. Yeah. And so you're going to now close schools, and you don't even know who's a good one, who's a bad one.
Wow.
Now, there's another kicker in the school closure thing. I think it gets pretty interesting. My school, we'll say, has 240 kids in it. And there's schools in the district with 440 kids. Why do they have that? Well, the boundaries. Well, who makes the boundaries? The school district makes the boundaries. So if you got 240, you got 240 because the school district is giving you 240, not because there's some thing out there in the ether that's making you. No, they're drawing the boundaries that way. And so you're going to close a school based on its size when you're making up the boundaries? That doesn't. Wait a minute here. That's. You're going to close the school, rack up that neighborhood, do all those negative things that it brings about, kids switching, you have to learn new teachers, all the things based on the size. When you're making the boundaries, and the boundaries are what creates the size, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So and are they taking that into account? Are they taking into account the equity and equality, which they've never done, never really figured it out? And you and I can't figure it out because there's different funding sources. You need to have the funding sources, and from those funding sources, you then have to see what the FTE, it's about FTE, not about teacher numbers. FTE is the full-time equivalent teacher. You can have a half-time librarian or a full-time librarian. They'll both be librarian on anything you see, but and at a half-time, what's the number of kids per month? How does this all sit down? See, and so the school closures, they haven't done that work, and they're not going to do that work, and they're going to rip up 10 neighborhoods. And they're even talking about also, and people who don't want them to rip up the neighborhoods are going, okay, what about closing the schools, the little specialty schools, the one that's on environment, or the Russian immersion program type, or well, wait a minute, those are really good. Kids want to go to those. Is that what you want to do? Close those schools? See, they don't have it together. And I like the people on the school board. I honestly think that this is probably the nicest people they've ever had on the school board.
But some are leaving. Julia Brim.
Well, but she's gone.
And Green.
They're gone.
And
they're
Green.
gone. I'm talking about the new ones.
The new ones.
New ones. The ones that are on right now are really nice people. But 2 of them were teachers. I don't really know much about Patty Sullivan, and nice woman for all I know. I've never heard negative stuff. She didn't run much of a campaign, but okay. But Eddie Yang, I think, was probably a high school teacher. Does he know the elementary schools? He talks about our job is to back up the superintendent. Well, the real job of the school board, according to state law, they make the decisions in the end. You got 4 votes in the school board, you can do any darn thing you want. You can do anything you want within the law, within, state law, federal law, county law, within the law, and within your policies, which you make, though, you can change them at any time. The school board has full control of anything. They can close every school or close no schools, or within the law, and it's not where you back up. I don't know. You should ask Kimberly Armstrong, the superintendent, to come on your show.
Yeah. Okay.
And give you some questions. and I've written her, asked, and said, "Hey, I'd love to sit down with you and talk about some of these things that we're talking about today." She doesn't even acknowledge my email, let alone answer it. So I don't. She's a, people say she's a nice person, but I don't know what she's doing. She came from Vancouver. I taught in the district she came from. It was a darn good district. But does she know about these school closures? Does she know how several years ago tore the community up? Does she understand a lot of this stuff? I don't know. When like I say, I think it's the nicest group of people, but they're kind of closed up. What often happens on the school board, I'm not saying this is what happens to them, but what often happens is this. You get on the school board and what you don't want to do, you got a list of things you'd like to do for kids. You go on that school board, and that's that list, and that's important to you. And after about 3 months, I guess, I figure, pretty soon it's, what's really important is being important. Yeah. There's this shift often that people go under, where they used to talk to a radical guy like me, maybe at the start, we'll sit down with you and talk to you, but now they won't even, because I want to be important. That becomes more important. Director Buell this, Director Buell that. Heck, I had to look in the mirror every morning practically and say, remember, you're here for the kids. Because people don't understand, it does turn your head. It can turn you around. Are you still there? And it's easy to convince yourself you are, even if you're not. And so I kind of question a little bit, Now, Rochelle Chase Miller is going to talk to me. I've asked for a couple other, let's sit down and talk about this stuff, which is historically, they don't know. Kimberly Armstrong, does she understand what happened in 1981 in Portland and what changes were made? That darn well, it still has an effect. One way or the other. It still has a thinking effect with people, even if it doesn't have an actual physical effect on the school, but it kind of basically does. And that'd be good for her to know, but no.
Interesting.
Jefferson High School. The question is, now they're going to do the bond, and what are they going to do with Jefferson? They're going to make it a neighborhood school. Well, you got some problems. Now, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm saying you should probably make it a neighborhood school. Right. But there's some things you got to kind of take into account. One of them, my kid goes to Grant, say, I'm going to now send him to Jefferson. Am I? Do I think that's a good idea? What do they have at Jefferson? That's the first question I'm going to ask, isn't it? What do they have? Jefferson has some good programs. They have have some work with the college down there, and they have those good programs. That was the best thing that SEI ever did. They put in a whole lot of people into Jefferson to help out. It was wonderful stuff. But they're not talking. If they're going to say you're now a neighborhood school, then at Jefferson, I should have everything you got at Lincoln. If I'm a neighborhood school, shouldn't I? Your neighborhood school, you got this. I'm a neighborhood school.
Right.
I got that. I got that.
Right next to community college.
The same as they have at Cleveland, or the same as they have. You should, but they don't have the material I've seen, and the presentation say. They're not saying everything at every high school will be at Jefferson the first year your kid comes here.
Right.
They're going to build it up maybe, or how many kids, we don't know. Well, the number of kids shouldn't mean anything in the high school if it's going to be a neighborhood high school. Mm-hmm. If you got 1,000 kids, you got 2,000 kids, guess what? It's the boundary again. Draw the boundary different, you got 1,500 in each. Yeah. But if they're going to have this over here in the high schools, and it's easy to see what they have in the high schools compared to the elementary schools. You can't see in the elementary schools, but in the high school, you can bring up a list of every elective they have in the high school. I have Paul Anthony did it and sent me a list of every elective, and so I can compare Franklin.
Wow.
And so Jefferson needs, if they're going to make a neighborhood school, then it should have everything the other ones have. And then we're going to transfer your kid. We're now moving your kid to Jefferson. And you're going, what the? But in actuality, they need to say, Jefferson will have everything Grant has.
Yeah, they haven't done that.
No. And they don't understand it, I don't think.
Jesus Christ.
They have to do it in order to make Jefferson work.
Right.
But they're not talking like that, and so that's a problem.
I got to inject this. My immediate mindset in terms of all of the marketing that we were faced with when we were communicating, whatever, it was always the black school, the minority school, Jefferson.
And actually,
and other folks saying, I don't want my job.
But actually now there's a huge number of people in the black community who are saying, hey, we want to keep this. It should be a neighborhood school. So fine by me. I'm just saying if they're going to do it, then you have to do it the same. Otherwise, it's so because that was the question when you and I were sitting out there in 1980.
Yes, very much so.
Because the black schools that were predominantly black did not have the elementary. They did not have the same stuff as the other schools. And so the parents who were really on top of it, they sent their kids on the bus.
That's right.
Because they couldn't send them. There was a better school over here than the school in their neighborhood. And that's always been wrong.
Wow.
And today but they've never gone through, and that committee that Paul and I set up that was going to do that for the elementary schools. What happened to it? I went off school board. I said to Julia Brim Edwards, is a person who I like. I think she's a very nice person. And I said, Julia, I want to stay on this committee because I knew what.
She was the chair at the time.
She was the chair of the school board, and she said, well, we'll see, Steve. And then Guerrero and her dumped the entire committee.
Wow.
Because it's not something that fits in nice.
Yes, that's right.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
This school
is
supposed to be equal.
That's right. So I need to interview Julia, too. If she
Good luck with that one.
Yes, that's going to be it. She's getting ready to go to the county. Okay, go. Okay, we got about 4 minutes. You can hit some of the higher topics.
No, I have one other thing.
Because I'm going to do another show. We're going to do another show.
Yeah, whatever. It's fine with me. But I have one other thing that's extra. The middle schools across Oregon, particularly, I don't know, they've gone way downhill. And the middle schools, the thing that's so important about middle schools, that's where kids drop out. They don't drop out of the school system in middle school, but that's where they drop out. They don't, because they don't do anything. And there's nothing, and a lot of them they've taken out, like when I was teaching in Vancouver, a middle school in Vancouver called Cummington. They had a football team, basketball team, boys and girls, basketball. They had just tons of things. They had wrestling team, gymnastics teams, and they had marching band that marched in the Rose Festival parade, not the big one, but the Junior Rose Festival parade. They had all of these things for kids. So if my language arts teacher's the coach of my basketball team, and there's no way I'm going to miss school. You know, absenteeism is a big problem now. And there's no way I'm missing school. And if we get to the basketball game, or when we're doing the marching band, or when the art stuff, they had some... I'm not going to miss school on those days. You have to give middle school kids a reason to come to school that's beyond the regular stuff. So you need, if you're not, and they've taken that stuff out, school after school after school after school. Oregon City, where I have a lot of great nephews and nieces, they don't have it in their school sports. In their middle schools.
Right.
Yeah, it's now you have to pay $600, $800 for your kid to play sports, which a lot of people do, but guess who doesn't? Yeah. Poor kids who could have played in high school, but then but having reasons, you should have, like, okay, wouldn't cost you much to have intramurals. Or how about after school, even computer game,
and they would do it.
Computer game leagues where you do certain computer games after school against each other.
Those kids busy.
Or you have, I mean, there's that, but stuff for them that they look forward to. We had a newspaper when I was taught at Lane Middle School. I did the newspaper. Kids cared about the newspaper. They had a story they were going to do, and they showed up. Their middle school has to have reasons to come to school, and they moved way away from that all throughout Oregon. I mean, they just don't have it in most places, and if they do have it, they don't have it like they used to up at Covington Middle School, or when I taught in Woodburn in 1960. Let me see, I started teaching in Woodburn in 1967 or 68. 67. We had basketball, we had football. There were 100 in the 7th and 8th grade. There were 125 boys. I had 80 of them at one point on my football team. Well, man, I was a math coach. They paid attention. They were on my team, and they paid attention to the PE guy and they paid attention to the good friend of mine who they knew was a good friend of mine down there. They're not going to get in trouble in this class. And while it doesn't get all the kids, I tried to get them to do it in Portland, but they wouldn't do it. When it doesn't get all the kids, it gets enough of them so that the ones left over are more easily managed with counseling and those types of things.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go.
Well, real quick on that particular piece about the middle school aspect of it, I come from Texas, and what we got equal was ROTC. I'm a product of ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps.
They took it out of Portland in the Vietnam War.
But every other school's got it outside of Portland. Wow. You remember I fought for that.
It's a little different now than it was in 1968.
Oh, very much so. Very much.
Having ROTC might not be as bad.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It was terrible then.
Well, look, that's a good
ROTC, you're just signing away your... I mean, you went to Vietnam. You know what happened.
Yes.
You know where some of your people are and how great it was. Yes.
Well, look, this is a good time. It's I got to bring you back on so we can finish our discussion. Okay, we can do that. Okay, good. But folks, thanks for watching. Share it with your friends. Okay, we'll be back to you. Take care.